everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Female PIERCER'S podcast. I'm your host, Nurse Tracy, Vermont licensed body piercer and piercing shop owner. And on this week's episode, I want to talk to you about choosing an apprenticeship supervisor. Now, if your state or country has a requirement that you work underneath an apprenticeship supervisor before you're licensed independently as a body piercer, then this episode's for you. Because how do you choose the person that supervises your apprenticeship? Well, if you're ready to poke holes in people, I want to help you pick the best mentor. And I'll also share with you how I chose my mentor when I was ready to start piercing. So first of all, in my humble opinion, we need to start with the legal stuff. And then there's always the vibe check. So number one, what's the legal stuff, right? You've got to check whether or not your piercing supervisor is legally licensed. And this may seem ridiculous in this day and age, but yes, there are people out there working without a license in licensed shops or working licensed in unlicensed shops. So make sure you do your due diligence. In my state, you are able to do a public lookup on the state board website and find out whether or not that licensee holds an active license. And so just double check, make sure that you can verify that this person has a license. After you've done that, go one step further and verify whether or not that person has ever been legally fined or reprimanded against their license. And in most cases, that is public information. So you should be able to find out what the person was reprimanded for and figure out whether or not you can still work with them, with your state board, because they'll tell you whether or not this person cannot supervise somebody, whether or not there's a time frame they have to wait before they can supervise somebody again. Or it will allow you to figure out whether or not you still want to work with that person, whether or not they did something that is a non-starter for you. It's a no-go. Now, if you do see funny business, make sure you speak up because you want to ensure it's not going to negatively affect your apprenticeship, that it's not going to carry over into your training experience. And if this person has supervised other artists previously, they should be able to give you a few references. They should be comfortable sharing that person's information with you so that you can reach out either personally or maybe scope them out online, figure out whether or not they're a successful artist and whether or not they have the skills that you would also like to have. If your previous supervisor's apprentices seem successful, there's a good chance that you yourself will be successful if you put your all into your training. But if you have any questions, feel free to pick apart those references and really ask them about their training experience. Find out what you need to know. Because after you've done your legal due diligence, it's time for the vibe check. And most importantly, before I entered into a contract with somebody and they agreed, we wanted to hang out together. We wanted to chat for a few hours. We wanted to talk about our expectations from the apprenticeship. And that allowed us to see whether or not we were a good fit for one another. Because do the supervisor and yourself have common interests? Do you have a common sense of humor? It's a long time to spend with somebody. In my state, it's 1,000 hours of an apprenticeship supervision of training time to spend with somebody that you don't get along with, that you don't find common ground with. So make sure you spend some time with them. Make sure they don't use language that you don't want to hear. Because if you get a few hours in and realize that this isn't the person that you want to work with, you may have already made an investment and now you're frustrated because you've got a long way to go before it's going to pay off. Now, talking about payoff, does your supervisor expect fair compensation for their work? Now, most apprenticeship supervisors will ask for some sort of compensation because they want to be paid for their time in teaching you their trade. But as a cosmetic tattoo artist, I have helped other cosmetic tattoo artists in my state find their 40-hour apprenticeship that they needed. And they needed it all over the state. So I've come in contact with many artists. At times, some artists were eager to help those students that were now seeking that apprenticeship, and they would accommodate them any way they could, make things affordable for them. Other times I would have shops messaging me saying they would only agree to supervise a student for that 40-hour apprenticeship for upwards of $10,000 and an agreement to work 50+ mile radius away from that shop after the apprenticeship is done. Now, while I'm sure some people will agree to pay that, I also think that some unsuspecting new professionals that are struggling to enter the field may be taken advantage of by those types of agreements. So while yes, the supervisor should be compensated fairly, you have to make sure that you agree on what is fair. And I also don't recommend paying full price until the apprenticeship is complete. Pay in segments or half now, half later, because you want to make sure you protect your investment and this person that you don't really know yet doesn't just take the money and run. Now, the next question you should ask your supervisor is, do they seek ongoing education? While there's no college for piercing, there are conferences for piercers that we can attend to receive regular ongoing training and to continue making connections within the industry. But whether or not your supervisor attends trade shows or communicates regularly with other artists, they should have a specific piercing style, or they should have a specific understanding in all styles. And I see a lot of professionals that really just become a silo of knowledge, and they're not willing to share or to work with others. And it really stifles not only what they're going to teach their apprentices, but it also stifles what they're going to be able to offer to the clients. Now, for example, my supervisor's been piercing for over 20 years, but he has no familiarity and refuses to use the IV style catheter needles. I personally love them. I feel comfortable with them. I've been a nurse since 2008. So sometimes in a lot of piercings, I prefer them because I know that I'm not going to lose connection. But if you don't try something new, if you're not willing to try the newest, the latest, the greatest, and at least figure out what it is you like or don't like about it, then how can you show that to the next person? And so while it is good to have an expertise, don't get stagnant with the same tools and the same way of thinking. Make sure that your supervisor has that varied background, that varied knowledge that they can then share with you. And talking about varied knowledge, does your supervisor have a willingness to train you in all body parts, in all body piercings? When selecting a piercing supervisor, make sure that you agree on the body parts that they're going to train you to pierce and that they're comfortable with. If you want to offer intimate piercings, but the supervisor's uncomfortable doing that, then make sure you know that up front. You should be able to have that supervisor talk you through any piercing, but having them at the bedside is going to be very different when it comes down to the piercing going well and not going so well. So my hope for every one of you seeking a body piercing apprenticeship is that you do find a supervisor that you vibe with and that can train you close to your home. Before I found an artist that was willing to train me within my shop, I was willing to travel 2 hours each way just to find a piercer to work with to complete my apprenticeship. And while I know that would have killed me, I was willing to do it out of sheer determination because I really wanted to learn body piercing that bad. And even though me and my piercing supervisor don't always see eye to eye, we have come to terms on the definition of offensive language in 2022. And we have come to terms with the things that he will and won't show me because that's just not cool. We don't do that anymore. Well, it's 2022. We do everything now. And after that, things improved. We worked through a lot of our stumbling blocks that you still can't figure out in a few hours of shadowing. But I would have loved personally to have found a female to work with. And in my state of Vermont, there are very few females to work with that are piercers. And that is one of my reasons why it's my goal to become a badass female piercer and to one day offer apprentices the experience to be supervised by another badass female piercer. So I really hope that not only does this podcast inspire you to join this field and to join us in this journey, but I hope that it helps you find the apprenticeship supervisor that's going to be the best fit for you as you move along in this journey and gain new knowledge in this profession. So let me know what you think of this episode and join me again next week on the next episode of the Female Piercers Podcast.